Continuing reading. Let me start the other recording. Okay, beside that diagram, in this diagram, information flows from hyperspatial dimensions and spins itself into patterns in space and time. An atom represents the flow of information in a specific harmonic within each cone. Thus, all information is connected and flows as in a dance. In the above diagram, information spinners can be seen emerging from the single point in the quantum field. As they spin outward, they combine to form what looks like the traditional atom. From the dimension of classical physics, the energy depicted as electrons is circling the denser protons and neutrons of the atom. From a quantum perspective, the harmonics of standing waves creates the form of the atom. From the holodynamic view, motion, mass, and energy are aspects of various conscious information systems. Matter is multidimensional. In physics, there is a web of relationships called dualities, which indicate everything is made of a dynamic information field that are all connected to one another. Each part of the atom has a counterpart in hyperspace. Each cone of the atom, as represented in that diagram, participates in this web of dualities. The information that makes up the structure of an atom is part of a multidimensional quantum field of information. It is this realization that allows us to explore the deeper dimensions of reality, where the keys to life and to human consciousness are unveiled. Positioned in the middle, between the outer limits and the inner limits of space and time, and part of the network within hyperspace, humans are faced with some very interesting dynamics. How we experience reality depends upon the dimension of our personal consciousness that we choose to use. In other words, information organizes differently according to how many dimensions of consciousness are involved. We can, for example, look at an atom as a little billiard ball, as in the early days of classical physics, or we can view it as a system of resonating frequencies, as in Bohr's, B-O-H-R, I'm bad at pronouncing names, atom in the beginnings of the quantum physics. Or we can view the latest version of the atom as multidimensional. It is both a billiard ball, a set of resonating frequencies at one and the same time, and it is much more. It is a holographic reflection from hyperspace. What I was teaching behind the Iron Curtain was the terrorists behind and in the terrorist hideaways in the Middle East was about that much more aspect of reality. In order to explain it, I would like to begin with Paul Townsend's concept of P-brains. I've said this so many times. P-brains, brains spelled B-R-A-N-E-S. According to Paul Townsend of Cambridge University, the spatial fabric of our universe has both extended and curled up or unfolded in P-brain dimensions. P stands for the number of brains, stands for the dimensions or levels of consciousness being used. Using the P-brains analogy, all objects are extended in P dimensions in time-space. That sort of doesn't make too much sense. All objects are extended in P dimensions in time-space. Get rid of time-space, because time-space is a P-brain reality. That statement was only made because of the amount of P-brains used to make that sentence up, which is kind of weird if you can see it. But a single dimension, one brain, would be a single particle or a string with only depth. When P equals 2, the two-brain world would have both depth and width, as in a membrane or a sheet. A three-brain world would be three dimensions in a depth width, and height as in our daily world we experience as reality. A four-brain world would include, for example, the dimension of time, so we could experience three-dimensional objects in motion. That's what time is watching things move. A five-brain world might be experienced as a holographic or counterparts in hyperspace. We could continue down into smallness or microcosms, as in the microtubes where enfolded dimensions of reality become obvious and information renaissance according to certain frequencies. Here we view the dimensions of collective consciousness and swarm intelligence. It requires at least 10 or 11 dimensions to understand gravity. This means that there are at least 10 or 11 values for p involved in dimensions of space and time. When most of us experience in our daily lives is limited to a four-brain world that is relatively flat compared to the 6 or more brains that are beyond our normal senses. Now, this is the problem I have with this, and I see things differently than most people do. But in order for him to write this book, he has to be able to write it within that four-brain world, which means he's talking about 10 or 11 different dimensions, all fitting within the fourth dimension p-brain world. So, like, to get into the fifth means you're out of space-time. It is like that's where humanity is going, is we're going to perceive our world without space and time. Which means I don't know if he's talking about 11 dimensions that we view things by, and these dimensions are brains that we use. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but I see, and he stops there at 4 brains. But then he also says that there are more than 4 brains, but he doesn't give value to it. He doesn't describe what that is, and that's what I was looking for, is the description of, okay, what does 5 look like? Describe 5. But yet he can't. But yet we can talk about things you can't see. I'll continue on and you'll see it. Using Townsend's analogy, we can now take a look at the human consciousness. Using the web of dualities found in subatomic physics, we realize that all atoms have dualities in hyperspace. This raises the question, do humans have a web duality in hyperspace? Could such a counterpart be evident within one of those enfolded p-brain dimensions of consciousness? Our hyperspatial counterpart, the full potential self. Stephen Hawking, The Universe in a Nutshell, shows that the fourth dimensional world of reality we experience in holographic projection from a region of space that is a p-brain dimension more complex than ours appear to be to the normal person. So to a person who views life with a fourth dimension, p equals 4, the holographic dimension would be a 5-brain world and would not be visible or comprehensible unless one were to expand his or her consciousness into the next dimension. Hawking depicts the holographic dimension in the following diagram. This is how you kind of see yourself, is you're flying, looking in the mirror. On the left it says, according to Stephen Hawking, the higher dimension encodes its information in a region of space onto a surface one dimension lower, with a one-to-one correspondence, so that one cannot distinguish which description is more fundamental. Thus, the full potential self of hyperspace and the physical self we experience each day on Earth are both separate and one at the same time. We are conscious of one or the other depending upon our choice of focus moment by moment in time. This diagram is very similar to saying you are a fish in a fishbowl, but you'll never know you're a fish in a fishbowl until you are out. So that means, like, if you view your perspective from a fourth dimension, a 4P brain, you actually are in a 5P brain looking at yourself in the 4, which means where we need to go is the 6th, so we can see ourselves in the 5th, if that makes any sense to you. My own experience with holographic hyperspatial counterpart, our full potential self, as I have come to call it, demonstrates that it has tremendous implications for humankind. I will discuss this in some detail throughout this text, but first I would like to discuss what we have learned about consciousness from a holographic point of view. Dimensions of consciousness. I like Townsend's P-brain analogy because I know that consciousness is multidimensional. At least this model allows us to look at consciousness in ways that explain a lot more about why people disagree, why they cannot see each other's view, and why we seem locked into continual conflict. So it helps us to understand more about war, terrorism, disease, and why we are killing the planet when solutions are possible. People are so conscious of only one dimension of reality, would be one P-brain, and limited to particular particle thinking. As consciousness emerges, people would become aware of different dimensions of reality. A P2 brain, for example, would experience breadth and width, but not height. A world without height would be experienced as the flatland world, where Jonathan Livingston Seagull would be meaningless. If someone conscious of a P3 brain world poked their finger into a P equals 2 brain world, it would appear to P equals 2 people, as though expanding circle as the finger entered the P2 world with a retracting circle as it withdrew. Now remember, when I was on the Dragon's Den and explained this water concept that I think would solve a hell of a lot of problems really, really fast, they kept telling me we very much live in a flat world and that ain't about to change. Burn to the Dragon's Den. The world is not flat, it's not round, it's multidimensional. They're just using very small P-brains to view their world, which is why they would call me a nut bar, but I hardly think I'm a nut bar if I even find some of the complicated sciences like this, which has been curing every uncurable disease for over 20 years. There is no up or down in a flatland that the Dragon's Den lives in. This does not mean that height does not exist. Height exists to those conscious of P equals 3 and any level above, but it would not exist for the person who lives in a flatland consciousness. That's why the Dragon's Den can't understand this. They live in a flat world. They take advantage of people from a flat world perspective, and they do not want you out of that world, because then they lose their wealth and you get everything starts to solve all problems when we get out of that way of thinking. But every person reading these words understands height. We are all conscious of a P equals 3 world of height, depth, and width. Most of us have no trouble expanding our consciousness into the experiencing a P equals 4 brain world. With our senses attuned to height, breadth, and width, we are able to experience the passage of time. In this frame of mind, we are basically assumed time as the measure of sequence of events. For most of us, this makes up our reality. We are mostly P equals 4 brain beings. We are raised as a 4-dimensional being. We are taught to be 4-dimensional thinkers, and we think our universe is a 4-brain universe. In our normal state of consciousness, reality R equals 4 brain P4, or R equals P4. How then can anyone claim we are living in a universe with more than 10 dimensions? We can imagine what it would be like to take away one dimension and have a flatland world, but can we imagine what it would be like to add another dimension and live in a P equals 5 world? What about a P6 brain or above? Can anyone imagine such a world? Yes, I can, and trust me, it's a bitch trying to explain it. Which is why I'm making these tapes, so you can kind of open your brains to a different viewpoint. And remember, the United Nations knows this information. This guy, Dr. Wolf, has sent so much information, but everybody's ignoring it. Why? Because they all want to be like the Dragon's Den and keep everybody stupid so that you can be controlled. That's evil. That's religion. They don't want you knowing the truth. I'll continue. I'm running out of time. Peace.